The sheets were white. Impossibly white. The kind of white that belonged in a magazine, not in her life. Claire sat up slowly, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears, the Chicago skyline blazing through floor-to-ceiling windows like something out of a dream she didn't remember having. Her dress, the navy one she'd worn to her friend Donna's retirement dinner, was still on her body, rumpled but intact. Her heels were placed neatly beside the bed. Placed. Like someone had taken care of her. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know how she got here. And standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee with the quiet stillness of a man who owned every room he ever walked into, was someone she had never seen before in her life. Tall. Silver at the temples. Eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and trusted nothing. He studied her the way you study a storm you didn't expect. "You're awake," he said. Not a question. Claire pulled the sheet up, a reflex, not a necessity, and heard her own voice come out harder than she felt. "What did you do to me?" Something moved across his face. Not guilt. Not arrogance. Something she couldn't name. He set the coffee down on the nightstand beside her, stepped back, and said the 4 words that would change the next 6 months of her life. "I kept you safe." Before we go into this story, hit the subscribe now, like and comment where you are watching from, it means a lot. The retirement dinner for Donna Hatchett had started at 7, and by 9:15, Claire Navarro was already calculating her exit. She sat at the far end of the long table at Mercer's, one of those downtown Chicago steakhouses where the lighting was warm and the wine was cold and everyone looked slightly more successful than they actually were. Around her, colleagues laughed too loudly and clinked glasses with the particular enthusiasm of people who were relieved it wasn't their retirement yet. Claire smiled when she was supposed to. Laughed at the right moments. She was good at that. Had been doing it for 2 years, since the divorce, since the house in Evanston sold, since she moved into the 2-bedroom apartment on Diversey and told herself it was cozy instead of lonely. 47 years old, and she was learning how to live in rooms that echoed. She'd been married for 19 years to a man named Patrick who turned out to love the idea of Claire more than Claire herself. He'd told her that, actually. Sitting at their kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, coffee going cold between them, he'd said, "I think I fell in love with who I thought you'd become. Not who you are." She'd sat with that sentence for 2 years. Turned it over like a stone in her pocket. Some nights it felt like the cruelest thing anyone had ever said to her. Other nights it felt like the truest. She was a hospital administrator at Northwestern Memorial. Competent. Respected. The kind of woman who got things done and didn't make a fuss about it. Her staff called her the fixer. Her ex-husband had called her unavailable. Both were probably right. She wore her composure like a second skin, so well-fitted that most people never noticed it was armor. Tonight it felt particularly heavy. "Claire, you have to try the salmon," said Donna from 3 seats down, her face flushed with wine and sentiment. Donna was 63 and had spent 31 years in hospital administration and was now going to spend her mornings in a garden in Naperville, and Claire felt something watching her. Something that was either happiness for Donna or grief for herself, and she couldn't quite tell which. "I'm fine with this," Claire said, lifting her glass of Malbec. Around 10 o'clock, the party moved to the bar attached to Mercer's. Claire almost didn't follow. She planned to slip out, flag a cab, be home by 10:30 with her shoes off and the television on. The specific ritual of a woman who had made peace with her own company even when that peace felt more like a ceasefire. But Donna grabbed her arm. "One drink. You never let yourself just be Claire. One drink." So she stayed. The bar at Mercer's was the kind of place that hummed. The lighting dropped lower, the music got quieter and more deliberate, and the people who inhabited it at this hour were different from the dinner crowd. More polished, more purposeful, like they'd come here with something specific in mind. Claire sat at the bar with her wine and her phone face down, and for exactly 12 minutes she did something she almost never did. She let herself be still. She watched the bartender, a young man with precise movements, work his way down the counter. She watched couples talk with their heads tilted toward each other. She watched a man in the corner booth with a glass of bourbon and a posture so controlled it looked like effort. She noticed him the way you notice something out of place. He was dressed simply, dark jacket, open collar, but everything about him radiated the particular stillness of someone who never had to try to command a room. He just did. He wasn't looking at her. But somehow she felt like he was aware of her. She looked away. She checked her phone. A text from her daughter Mia, who was 23 and living in Austin. "Mom, did you go out tonight?" "Proud of you, LOL." Claire typed back, "Don't make it weird." Then added a heart. She ordered water. She was switching to water. The bartender brought it with a smile, and then someone sat down 2 stools away. Not the man from the corner booth, just a heavy-set guy in a loosened tie who immediately turned toward her with the specific energy of someone who had consumed 4 drinks and a plan. "You look like you just survived something," he said. Claire blinked. "Excuse me." "I just mean, you've got that look. Like you're breathing for the first time in a while." She turned back to her water. "I'm just having a drink." He didn't take the hint. He almost never did, that type. He kept talking, his name, his job, something about a merger, and Claire felt the familiar low-grade exhaustion of being a woman alone at a bar, the tax you paid just for existing in public. And then, without any drama or announcement, someone sat down on the stool to her left. "She's with me," said a voice. Low. Certain. Claire turned. It was the man from the corner booth. Up close, he was, she didn't have the word for it. Not classically handsome. Something more specific than that. A face that had been through weather. Eyes so dark they looked almost navy in the bar light. He wasn't looking at the Thai guy. He was looking at her. And there was a question in his gaze. Is this okay? That she hadn't expected. She made a decision in 2 seconds. "Yes," she said. He was just leaving. The Thai guy muttered something and slid off his stool. And then it was just her and this stranger and the hum of the bar between them. "Read," he said, and offered his hand. Claire. His handshake was brief. Deliberate. Like everything else about him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. So why did you?" He looked at her for a moment, that same storm-studying look she'd see again later, in a room she didn't yet know. "Because you looked like you were about to handle it yourself and do it very politely, and I thought someone should just handle it instead." She laughed. Actually laughed. Small and surprised. "That's very presumptuous," she said. "Probably," he agreed, and signaled the bartender. They talked for 40 minutes. She didn't plan to. He didn't seem to either. They talked the way strangers sometimes do when the lights are low and the hour is late and ordinary social arithmetic doesn't apply. Openly, a little recklessly, with a particular honesty of people who don't expect to see each other again. She learned, he was in Chicago on business. He was staying nearby. He'd come to this bar specifically because it was quiet. He did not volunteer his last name. She told him, she ran a hospital department. She'd lived in Chicago her whole life. She was recently, she paused, reorganizing her life. He nodded at that like it made complete sense. "That's a good way to put it," he said. At some point, she could not recall exactly when, she switched from water back to wine. Donna's group had drifted over and absorbed her briefly, and somewhere in the noise and the warmth and the 2 glasses she'd had before this one, the evening blurred softly at the edges. The last thing she clearly remembered was Reed saying something that made her laugh again, harder this time, and the way his face changed when she did, like the shutters on a window opening just slightly. Then, nothing. Until white sheets. Blazing skyline. A man in a doorway. "What did you do to me?" If this is already pulling at something in you, the moment we meet someone and everything shifts before we're ready, hit that like button, subscribe and stay with me. This story is just getting started. And I promise you, the truth of what happened that night is more unexpected than you think. The coffee was still steaming on the nightstand. Claire stared at it like it was evidence. In 23 years of adult life, through hospital night shifts and red-eye flights and one memorably bad trip to New Orleans with Donna in 2009, she had never once woken up without knowing exactly where she was. Orientation was her superpower. Context was her comfort zone. Right now she had neither. She looked around the room slowly, the way she trained herself to assess situations at work, calmly, methodically, even when her heart was doing something completely different. The room was enormous. Not hotel enormous. Home enormous. The kind of space someone lives in rather than passes through. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls. Chicago spread out below like a lit circuit board, Lake Michigan a dark ribbon at the edge of the world. The furniture was spare and expensive, the kind that whispered rather than announced. Her purse was on the chair by the window. Closed. Intact. Her heels were beside the bed. Placed. Both of them. Neatly. Like someone had thought about it. She was still in her navy dress. She registered all of this in about 4 seconds and then looked back at the man in the doorway and said it again, quieter this time, which somehow made it worse. "What did you do to me?" Reed didn't move from the doorway. Didn't cross toward her. Didn't do any of the things a man with bad intentions would do. He stayed exactly where he was, giving her the room, giving her the space, and his face did something complicated that she didn't have the vocabulary for yet. "Nothing," he said. "I want to be very clear about that." "Then why am I?" "You passed out at the bar." The words landed flat and factual. No softness around them. No apology. Claire opened her mouth. Closed it. She stopped. Tried again. "I don't pass out." "You did last night." "I had 2 glasses of wine." Something shifted in his expression. A tightening. Subtle but unmistakable. The look of a man who'd been awake thinking about something and had arrived at a conclusion he didn't like. "I know," he said. "I was watching." The words should have alarmed her. Somehow they didn't, not the way he said them, with that flat, careful honesty, like a man who decided that the only useful thing right now was the truth. "What does that mean?" she asked. He came into the room then, not toward the bed, but toward the chair by the window. He turned it slightly and sat down, elbows on his knees, that controlled posture loosening by 1 degree. Like this conversation required him to be less armored than usual. "The man I sent away," he said. "The one at the bar." "The tie." "Yes." A pause. "After I sat down with you, he went back to his group. I watched him, I don't know why, instinct maybe, and I saw him come back to the bar when you went to say goodbye to your friend. He was at your glass for about 3 seconds. The room went very quiet. Claire heard her own breathing. "You're saying he." "I don't know what he put in it. I just know you were fine, and then 15 minutes later you weren't. I got to you before you fell." A muscle worked in his jaw. "Barely." She sat with that. "Barely." The word dropped through her like a stone through still water, sending rings out in every direction. She felt the rings. Felt the implications of them. A different version of this night, the version where Reed had gone back to his corner booth, where she'd picked up that glass and finished it alone. She stopped that thought. Put a wall up in front of it. "Why didn't you take me to a hospital?" "I tried," he said. "You came around enough to say no. Twice." "You were," something moved across his face, almost like a smile but quieter. "You were very clear about it. You said you worked at one and they'd make it a whole thing." Despite everything, she felt a ghost of recognition. That sounded like her. "And you thought bringing me here was better?" "My security team assessed the situation. A hotel would have required paperwork, staff, cameras. If this became a story," he stopped. Chose different words. "I wanted to keep you safe. Not make you a headline." "Your security team?" "Yes." "How many people does a person need in their security team?" He looked at her steadily. "Enough." She studied him across the room. This man who was a stranger and yet had spent the night ensuring she was safe, who had positioned himself in the doorway rather than beside her, who had placed her shoes neatly on the floor as though she was something worth taking care of. "Who are you?" she asked. Not hostile. Genuinely. "I told you." "Read." "Read what?" "A beat." "Calloway." She didn't recognize it in the first second. Then she did. It moved through her like a cold current. Not panic, just recalibration. Read Calloway. Calloway Group. The infrastructure and development empire that had its name on half the new construction on Chicago's waterfront. She'd read an article about him in a waiting room somewhere, one of those Forbes profiles that described him as relentlessly private and notoriously difficult to access. She was currently sitting in his bed. "Oh," she said. "Yeah." I yelled at a billionaire. "You asked a reasonable question," he said. "I don't consider it yelling." She laughed, that same startled, unplanned laugh from the bar, and watched something happen in his face when she did. The same thing as last night. Those shutters, opening. She stopped laughing. "I need to call my daughter," she said. "She might be worried." "Your phone is in your purse." "It's charged. My assistant plugged it in around 2 a.m. She blinked. Your assistant. She was very professional about it. I'm sure. She reached for her purse, found her phone, saw 3 texts from Mia, the last one from 7 a.m. that said simply Mom, and typed back, I'm fine. Explain later. Don't freak out. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, too late. Claire set the phone down and looked at the coffee on the nightstand. Still warm. Someone had timed that. Had brought it in, placed it within reach, at the exact moment she was likely to wake up. You planned all of this, she said. How to manage me. I planned how to keep you comfortable, he said. There's a difference. Is there? I think so. She picked up the coffee. Took a sip. It was perfect. Medium roast, light on the bitterness, a quality you only got from beans that cost more than her grocery budget. Of course it was perfect. Of course. I should go, she said. My driver will take you wherever you need. I can get a cab. Claire. Her name in his mouth, the first time he'd used it since the bar, low and direct. Please let me do this one thing. She looked at him. He wasn't asking out of guilt or obligation. She could feel the difference between those things and this. Had spent enough years in rooms where people managed each other to recognize when something was genuine. He just didn't want her to leave unprotected. Fine, she said. The driver. She stood, smoothed her dress with both hands, a gesture so habitual it was almost unconscious. The Claire Navarro reset, and picked up her heels. She didn't put them on. Just held them. At the bedroom door, she stopped. She turned back. He was still sitting in the chair, elbows on his knees, watching her with that same expression, the storm-studying look, and for one suspended moment the Chicago morning poured through the windows and made everything look like the opening frame of something. Thank you, she said. For the being careful part. Don't thank me, he said. And then quieter, I should have gotten there sooner. She felt that sentence in her sternum. The weight of it. The self-directed anger underneath it. Quiet, contained but real. She left before she could feel any more. The elevator was mirrored on 3 sides. She saw herself, navy dress, bare feet on marble, heels hanging from 2 fingers, hair that had survived the night better than her composure, and stood there in the descent from a 41st floor to the lobby thinking about a man who had placed her shoes neatly beside a bed, who had charged her phone, who had timed the coffee, who had said I should have gotten there sooner like it was a failure he'd be carrying. Stop it, she told her reflection. You don't know him. You know nothing about him. This is not a story. This is a Wednesday morning and you have a department meeting at 10. Her reflection looked unconvinced. The lobby was marble and glass and quiet at this hour. A man near the entrance, black jacket, earpiece, the specific stillness of security, nodded at her and said, Ms. Navarro. The car is outside. She almost asked how he knew her name. Then she remembered. Reed Calloway. Of course he knew her name. The car was black. The driver was silent. The city moved past the windows in the gray February morning light, familiar and strange at once, and Claire sat in the back seat and pressed her palm flat against her sternum the way she did when she needed to locate herself. You're fine, she thought. You're fine. Nothing happened. Something almost happened and didn't, because of a stranger who is no longer a stranger and is also someone you will never see again. She believed 3 of those things. If someone has ever taken care of you when you didn't ask, when you didn't even know you needed it, and you didn't know what to do with that feeling, you already understand exactly where Claire is sitting right now. Subscribe and stay with this story. Because what happens next? She did not think about him on Thursday. She was very deliberate about this. She ran her 6 a.m. meeting with the department heads with a particular sharpness she deployed when she needed to feel like herself, organized, necessary, in command of the room. She signed off on 3 budget revisions. She walked the floor at noon, checking in with her nursing staff the way she always did, learning names, asking about families, remembering the specific human texture of the work that all the administrative machinery existed to support. She did not think about white sheets or navy blue eyes or coffee that arrived at the exact right moment. She went home at 7. Made pasta. Called Mia. Mom. I know. You have to tell me. Nothing happened, Mia. You didn't come home. I was safe. She paused over the pasta water, watching the steam rise. Someone made sure I was safe. A long silence. Then, who? Nobody. Someone I met at the bar. It was nothing. Mom, that's literally the beginning of every. Good night, Mia. She hung up, ate her pasta, watched 40 minutes of television without retaining a single frame. She did not think about him. Friday morning, the flowers arrived. Not roses. Not the performative dozen red that announced themselves from across a room. These were something else. Entirely, deep blue irises and white ranunculus, arranged simply in a low glass vase, with the specific restraint of someone who understood that understatement was its own kind of statement. The card was small. The handwriting was deliberate. For the woman who handles things very politely, and doesn't need anyone to handle them for her. I wanted to send these anyway. Ah, see. Carol at the front desk brought them back to Claire's office with barely concealed delight. Secret admirer? Absolutely not, Claire said. She put them on the windowsill. She told herself it was because throwing them away would be wasteful. She looked at them 11 times before noon. The second thing arrived Saturday. Not flowers this time. An envelope, hand-delivered to her apartment building, which meant he'd found her address, which should have alarmed her and instead produced a more complicated feeling she refused to examine. Inside was a single card, the kind that came from an actual stationery store, thick cream paper. There's a man in custody. I thought you should know. My team identified him, the one from the bar. He'd done it before. The police have what they need. You don't owe me anything for this. I just didn't want you to spend any time wondering if it was real or if you were overreacting. You weren't. Read. She sat on her couch for a long time after reading it. You weren't overreacting. 4 words. And somehow they cut straight through 2 years of Patrick's quiet, consistent implication that she was too sensitive, too serious, too much and also somehow not enough. She turned the card over. No return address. No phone number. She thought about that deliberately. A man with a security team and a 41st floor penthouse and his name on half the Chicago waterfront had chosen not to include his phone number. Had sent flowers with a self-deprecating note. Had informed her of an outcome she deserved to know about and then stepped back. You don't owe me anything. She'd been managed by men who were good at it. Patrick had been excellent, smooth and subtle, making her feel like his preferences were her own ideas. She knew what that felt like from the inside. She had sensors for it now, recalibrated by 2 years of solitude and self-study. This didn't feel like that. This felt like someone who understood the difference between a door and a wall and was, carefully, without pressure, standing near the door. She put the card in her kitchen drawer. She took it back out 20 minutes later. She picked up her phone. Put it down. Picked it up again. How does someone contact you, she typed into a search bar, when they didn't give you their number but you have their name? She stared at that sentence for a moment, then closed the browser with the specific energy of a woman who is not doing this. She was not doing this. He was in a board meeting on Monday when he stopped listening. This was not something that happened to Reed Calloway. He had built his entire professional reputation on a quality of attention that bordered on predatory, the ability to hold every thread of a conversation simultaneously, to hear what was said and what wasn't, to find the structural weakness in an argument the way he found it in a building. He was currently sitting at the head of a $40 million acquisition discussion, and he was thinking about the way Claire Navarro had laughed. Twice. Both times unplanned. Both times brief and startled, like she'd forgotten for a moment that she wasn't supposed to. Read. He looked up. Davis, his CFO, was watching him with a careful expression of a man who had worked for Reed for 11 years and had never once seen him drift. Run it again from the projected yield, Reed said evenly. Davis ran it again. Reed listened. Filed it. Made 2 decisions and a counteroffer. And thought underneath all of it, about a woman smoothing her dress with both hands before she walked out of his room, a gesture so habitual it looked like self-assembly, like she was putting herself back together piece by piece in a doorway. He hadn't meant to send the flowers. His assistant, Veronica, had asked if he wanted to send something and he'd said yes before he'd thought it through, and then he'd written the note himself, which he hadn't done for anyone in a very long time, and the self-deprecating line had arrived before he could edit it. For the woman who handles things very politely. He'd sat with the note for a full minute before deciding to send it. Not because he was unsure about the words. because he was unsure about what the words were the beginning of. He was 52 years old. He had not been unsure about something personal in a long time. He'd arranged his life specifically to avoid it: the airtight schedule, the controlled environment, the careful distance between himself and anyone who might require him to be more than functional. It had worked. It had worked very well. He was also, underneath the career and the penthouse and the absolute command of every room he walked into, profoundly alone in a way he'd stopped naming because naming it made it louder. He'd been engaged once. 15 years ago. A woman named Joanna, who was warm and sharp and laughed easily and turned out to be systematically funneling information about his development projects to a competitor. The betrayal had been financial and personal simultaneously, the two kinds of damage that reinforce each other, doubling the load. He'd rebuilt. Of course he'd rebuilt. That was what Reed Calloway did. But he'd rebuilt differently. Smaller, in the human dimensions. More glass and steel, less, whatever the opposite of that was. And then a woman in a navy dress had sat down at a bar and laughed at something he said, and he'd felt something move in him like tectonic plates. Slow. Massive. The kind of movement you don't notice until everything on the surface starts to shift. He hadn't included his number in the second note on purpose. He wanted her to choose. Wanted there to be no obligation, no easy path of least resistance. If she reached out, it would be because she decided to. And if she didn't, he'd accept that. He'd add it to the list of things he'd arranged himself not to need. He was very good at that list. She called the Calloway Group main line on Tuesday afternoon. He knew because Veronica told him, voice perfectly neutral in the way it got when she was actively suppressing a reaction. Claire Navarro called the main line. She said she just wanted to say thank you. She left her number. Reed put his pen down. "Read it to me," he said. Veronica read it. He wrote it on the back of an envelope and looked at it for a moment. "Should I?" Veronica began. "I'll handle it," he said. He called her that evening. 7:15, because that felt like a reasonable hour and he had thought about it, which was itself information he chose not to examine too closely. She picked up on the third ring. "I wasn't sure you'd call directly," she said. No preamble. He liked that. "You left your number," he said. "I wanted to say thank you. For telling me about the man. That you'd handled it. You deserved to know." Still. A pause. The flowers they were nice. The note was another pause shorter. It was a good note. "I meant it." "I know. That's what made it a good note." He was quiet for a moment. In the background he could hear the small sounds of her apartment, a faint television, the specific acoustic texture of a medium-sized urban space. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Physically." "Fine. I was fine by Thursday. I have a meeting Wednesday, a staff evaluation Friday. I'm fine." "You listed your schedule." "I beat. Yes. I do that when I'm nervous." He felt something loosen in his chest. She'd said nervous. Without armor. Just said it. "I'd like to see you," he said. "If you want that." No obligation. No context from the other night. Just dinner. The pause was longer this time. He counted it. 4 seconds. "Why?" she said. He thought about the honest answer. Gave it, "Because you're the first person in a long time who's made me want to be in the same room." 5 seconds this time. "Dinner," she said finally. "Once. And I'm choosing the restaurant." "Okay. Somewhere normal. Not whatever that penthouse situation was." "Understood." "Read." "Yeah. If this gets strange or managed feeling, I'm leaving." "I know," he said. "And then, I'll be trying very hard not to manage anything." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Almost. Tuesday," she said. "I'll text you the address." She hung up. Reed sat in his office, 41st floor, Chicago glittering below him on every side, and felt something he hadn't felt in so long it took him a moment to identify it. Something adjacent to hope. He wasn't sure yet if that was good news or a warning. Probably, he thought, it was both. She sent the address Sunday night. A place called Lola's on the north side, a neighborhood Italian restaurant with exposed brick and tables close enough together that you had to lean in to hear each other. He looked it up. 47 reviews. Average check, $30 a person. A place that had been there 20 years and had no intention of being impressive. He smiled at his phone for the first time in, he couldn't remember. He texted back, Tuesday. I'll be there. 3 minutes later, don't be late. He typed, I'm never late. Her response came immediately, everyone says that. He was still looking at his phone when Davis knocked and came in with the quarterly projections, and Reed set the phone face down and returned to being the person he was supposed to be. But the smile stayed. Quietly. Under everything. He was already there when she arrived. She noticed that first, before the restaurant, before the warm bread smell and the soft lighting and the Frank Sinatra leaking from somewhere in the back. She noticed that he was there, seated at a corner table, jacket on, hands around a water glass, watching the door with the focused quiet of a man who had decided that being on time meant being early. He's never late, she thought. Of course he isn't. She'd spent 45 minutes getting dressed, which was 35 minutes longer than she normally spent, and something she was choosing not to think about. She'd landed on dark trousers and a burgundy blouse that Mia had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, and she'd never worn because it felt like too much. Tonight she'd put it on and looked at herself in the mirror and thought, this is just dinner. This is one dinner at a normal restaurant, and you are a grown woman who has survived worse. She walked in. He stood when he saw her. Not a half-rise, the performative almost stand that men did when they were doing the minimum. He stood fully, the way someone did when they've been raised to mean it, and something about that simple gesture, so quiet, so undemonstrative, landed somewhere in her chest and just stayed there. You wore color, he said. She sat down across from him. You noticed. It suits you. Don't start with compliments. I'll get suspicious. He sat back down, something shifting in his expression, that almost smile, the one that lived just below the surface. Noted. No compliments. What are the other rules? I'll tell you as you break them. Fair. She picked up the menu. He'd already looked at his. It was face down, which meant he'd read it while waiting, which meant he'd been here long enough to do that, which meant... How long have you been here? She asked. 20 minutes. She looked up. The reservation was for 7. I know. That's not being early. That's being anxious. The almost smile became an actual one, brief, unguarded, the first fully unguarded thing she'd seen on his face. It changed him. Made him look like someone who had once laughed easily and had simply been out of practice. I was anxious, he said simply. She set the menu down. She hadn't expected that. The directness of it, no deflection, no reframe, just yes, I was nervous, so what? Patrick would have turned it into a joke or a compliment or something that redirected attention away from any actual admission. Reed just said it. Like honesty was a muscle he'd decided to use. Me too, she said. The waiter came. They ordered without the particular performance of two people trying to impress each other. She got the eggplant parmesan. He got the linguine with clams. They split a bottle of house Chianti that cost less than Reed probably spent on a single lunch, and neither of them mentioned it. The restaurant hummed around them. Families at the big tables. A couple celebrating something with a small cake. 2 women at the bar sharing a bottle and a story. Lola's felt like a place where real life happened, and Claire had chosen it specifically for that reason. She wanted to see how Reed Calloway moved through real life. Whether he'd be uncomfortable, performative, diminished without the penthouse and the security detail and the $40 million acquisition discussions. He wasn't any of those things. He was, if anything, more himself. Tell me something true, she said, when the wine arrived. He looked at her over the rim of his glass. That's how you want to do this. I'm 47 years old. I don't have time for the version where we talk about the weather for an hour and pretend we're not trying to figure each other out. He was quiet for a moment. Considering. My father was a construction foreman in Gary, Indiana, he said. We lived in a 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. And a furnace that broke every February. I slept on a fold-out couch until I was 16. She hadn't expected Gary. She hadn't expected the specificity of 1 bathroom and broken furnace. Forbes profiles didn't tend to include those details. How'd you get from there to, she gestured vaguely upward, in the direction of the 41st floor. Scholarships. Then work. Then more work. Then a very specific kind of stubbornness that my father called a character flaw and turned out to be a business strategy. Do you still talk to him? Your father. A pause. He died 8 years ago. Heart attack. He never, Reed stopped. Looked at the table for a moment. He never saw any of it. The first building I put my name on, he was already gone. She heard it, the unfinished sentence underneath the sentence. He never got to see. Not said as self-pity. Said as fact, the way you stated facts that you'd made peace with even though the peace was incomplete. I'm sorry, she said. He would have hated the penthouse, Reed said. He would have said it was showing off. Is it? He looked at her. Probably. She laughed. He did too, that same surprised into it quality as the almost smile, like laughter was something that happened to him rather than something he did. Your turn, he said. She turned her wine glass slowly. I was married for 19 years. You mentioned reorganizing your life. Yes. He, Patrick, was a good man in a lot of ways. Reliable, responsible, good father to Mia. She paused. He just loved an idea of me that didn't match the actual me, and at some point we both had to admit that. Who admitted it first? He did. She said it without flinching. And I was furious. For a long time. Because it felt like he was saying I was defective. Like I hadn't measured up to some blueprint he'd had in his head. And now. She considered. Now I think he did me a favor. I just needed 2 years of being angry first. Reed was quiet for a moment. Really listening, not waiting for his turn, not formulating a response. Actually listening. In the specific way that meant he was taking what she said seriously rather than just receiving it. The anger makes sense, he said. Being told you're not the person someone needed you to be, that's not a small thing to be handed. No. She looked at him. You sound like you know something about that. He did the thing where his face went carefully still. She was learning that this was what happened when he arrived at territory he didn't usually enter. Not a wall exactly, more like a door he had to decide to open. He opened it. I was engaged, he said. 15 years ago. Her name was Joanna. Claire waited. She was everything I thought I wanted. Warm. Funny. She made me feel like the controlled, careful version of myself I'd built was optional. Like I could be less armored. What happened? She was passing information to a competitor. Development plans, bid figures, internal projections. Had been for 14 months. He said it evenly. Clinically. The way you described something you'd processed so thoroughly it no longer had edges. My company almost lost a $200 million project. I found out the same week I'd planned to propose. Claire set her wine glass down. Reed. It was a long time ago. That's not the point. She searched for the right word. That's a particular kind of damage. Someone using your vulnerability against you. You don't just get over that. He looked at her steadily. No, you don't. Is that why you didn't put your number in the note? A beat. Yes. You needed me to choose. I needed to know it wasn't obligation, or proximity, or gratitude. He paused. I've had people stay close to me for every reason except the right ones. I've gotten good at offering the exit. She thought about that. About a man who'd been betrayed at the exact moment he was most open and had spent 15 years building a life that was magnificent and impenetrable and profoundly lonely. She thought about the neatly placed shoes and the timed coffee and the self-directed anger. I should have gotten there sooner, and how it all connected now into a portrait of someone who showed care through action because words and closeness had once cost him everything. She understood that. She understood it in her bones. I do the same thing, she said quietly. What? Offer the exit. To Mia, to my staff, to anyone who might need something from me that I'm not sure I can give. She looked at her plate. If I tell people they don't have to stay, then them staying means something. And them leaving doesn't. She stopped. Doesn't confirm the thing Patrick said, Reed finished. She looked up. That you're not who he needed you to be, he said. You've been waiting for the next person to reach that conclusion. The restaurant kept humming. Silverware, conversation, the distant Sinatra. Normal life going on in every direction. Claire felt something shift inside her that she hadn't felt shift in 2 years. Something that had been load-bearing, structural, that she built her daily functioning around. The particular bracing of a person who has decided they are probably too much or not enough and has arranged their life accordingly. She felt it move. Just slightly. Just an inch. But movement was movement. "You're very perceptive for someone who claims to be bad at people," she said. "I never claimed that." "You implied it." The controlled, careful version. "Being careful isn't the same as being bad at people," he said. "It means I pay attention." To what? To what people do when they think no one's watching. A pause. You smooth your dress when you're resetting yourself. You list your schedule when you're nervous. You choose restaurants with 47 reviews because you wanted to see who I was without the context of my money. And you said thank you for the flowers by calling the main corporate line instead of finding my personal number, because you wanted to give me the option of not responding. She stared at him. "You've been watching me," she said. "I've been paying attention," he corrected quietly. "There's a difference." She thought about that difference for a moment. Thought about all the years of being with someone who looked at her without seeing her, not out of cruelty, just out of the particular blindness of someone too absorbed in their own idea of things. And here was this man, this controlled and careful and quietly damaged man, who had seen her in a bar for 40 minutes and then 2 hours across a dinner table and had paid attention in the specific way that meant he was treating her as real. As someone worth the effort of accurate observation. It was, she thought, one of the most intimate things anyone had done for her in years. And it terrified her completely. They stayed until Lola's was almost empty. The couple with the cake had gone. The women at the bar. The families. The waiter had stopped by twice to ask if they needed anything else, and both times they'd said no and not moved. Outside, the February night had sharpened into the specific Chicago cold that had teeth in it. He'd put his jacket around her shoulders at some point. She couldn't remember exactly when, just that it had happened naturally, without announcement, and they walked half a block before she realized she was still wearing it. She stopped under a streetlight. "Read." He turned. She handed the jacket back. Their hands were both on it for a moment, just a moment, barely a second, and the contact was nothing, just wool and cold air between their fingers, and it was also somehow everything. "I had a good time," she said. "I didn't expect to." "Neither did I." "That's not comforting." "I meant, I hoped to. I didn't dare expect it." He held the jacket. "There's a difference. You keep making those distinctions. They matter." She looked at him, really looked, the way she'd been careful not to all evening, the way you avoided looking directly at something too bright. The Chicago cold and the streetlight and this man who had placed her shoes neatly on the floor and timed the coffee and paid attention and opened the door to Joanna and Gary, Indiana and the fold-out couch and the broken furnace. "I'd like to do this again," she said. He was quiet for one beat. The careful beat. The beat of a man who always offered the exit and was trying to learn how to stand in the doorway instead. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." She nodded. Turned. Took 4 steps toward the waiting car. "Claire." She turned back. He was standing exactly where she'd left him, jacket over one arm, Chicago winter doing its worst around him, looking at her with an expression that had no more armor in it. "The burgundy suits you," he said. "I know I'm not allowed to say that. I'm saying it anyway." She felt the smile before she could stop it. "Good night, Reed," she said. She got in the car. She pressed her palm to her sternum the whole way home. Not to locate herself this time. Just to feel what was there. 3 weeks later. It started so small she almost missed it. A text that took 6 hours to come back instead of 20 minutes. A phone call that ended 10 minutes earlier than usual. "I have an early meeting, I'll call tomorrow." He did call tomorrow. But the call was different. Efficient. Warm enough that she couldn't point to anything specific, couldn't hold up a single sentence and say this is the thing that's wrong. Just less. A degree less present. A fraction less open. She noticed the way you notice a change in weather before you can name it. Something in the atmosphere. A pressure shift. The particular quality of air before a storm that your body registers before your mind catches up. She told herself she was reading into things. She was very good at reading into things, Patrick had told her. You find problems that aren't there, Claire. She believed him for a long time. had learned to second-guess her own instincts the way you learned to second-guess a compass that had been wrong before. But her instincts hadn't been wrong about Reed yet. And they were telling her something was happening. The Wednesday coffee didn't come. She noticed at 9 a.m. She noticed at 10. She did not text him about it because she was not going to be a woman who texted about coffee. That was not who she was. That was not the arrangement. There had been no explicit promise of Wednesday coffees. It had simply become a thing, and now it wasn't happening, and that was fine. It was fine. At 11:15 she got a message. Stuck in a meeting. Sorry about this morning. She typed back, no problem. 2 words. Clean. Unbothered. She stared at her screen for 4 minutes after sending it. Friday dinner was cancelled. His assistant called, not Reed, his assistant, to say he'd been pulled into an emergency situation with a development project and needed to reschedule. Professional, apologetic, completely appropriate. She said, of course. Tell him not to worry. She hung up and sat in her office and looked at the blue irises on her windowsill. She kept replacing them, had been replacing them since the first bouquet, a small private ritual she hadn't told anyone about, and felt something cold moving through her chest. Not anger. Fear. The specific fear of a woman who has very carefully, very deliberately opened a door she kept sealed for 2 years, and is now watching it swing shut again from the other side. She called Donna that night. Talk, Donna said, because Donna always knew. I think he's pulling back. Reed. Yes. He's becoming careful again. I can feel it. Have you asked him about it? No, Claire. I know. You cannot do the thing where you sense a problem and then manage around it silently for 3 months until it becomes unfixable. I know, Donna. That's what you did with Patrick. I know. Sharper than she meant. Then, I know. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to make it weird if it's nothing. And if it's something? She looked at the irises. Then I need to know, she said quietly. Before I'm in any deeper. She was already in deeper. They both knew that. But saying it out loud had a finality she wasn't ready for at 9:47 on a Friday night. Call him, Donna said. Not a text. Call him. She called him Saturday morning. He picked up on the second ring, that hadn't changed, he always picked up fast, like he'd been waiting, and said hey in that way he had, low and direct, and for a moment everything felt normal and she almost convinced herself she'd invented the whole thing. Then she heard it. Underneath the warmth. The slight distance. Like a pane of glass had been installed between where he was and where she was, and he was hoping she wouldn't notice. She noticed. Are you okay? She asked. Fine. Busy week. Reed. A pause. Yeah, he said. Just that. What happened? Nothing happened. I told you. Something happened, she said. Quiet but certain. I'm not asking you to perform being fine. I'm asking what happened. A longer pause. The kind that had weight in it. I'll come by tonight, he said. If that's okay. It's okay. 6 o'clock. I'll be here. She hung up and pressed both palms flat on her desk and breathed. He looked tired. That was the first thing she saw when she opened the door. Not the jacket, not the careful posture, not the controlled Reed Calloway presentation. Just a man who hadn't been sleeping well, with something unresolved living behind his eyes. She let him in. Made coffee. Did not fill the silence with noise because she'd learned that he needed silence to arrive at things, that words came to him from the center outward and you had to wait for them to surface. They sat on her couch. The Mia blanket between them. The city outside going about its business. He held the coffee with both hands and looked at the middle distance for a long moment. Then, I bought a ring, he said. She went completely still. I'm not, he stopped. Started again. 3 weeks ago. The Tuesday after Lola's. I was walking past a jewelry store on Michigan Avenue and I went in and I looked at rings and I found one and I almost bought it. The apartment was very quiet. I didn't buy it, he said. I stood there for about 4 minutes and then I left. He looked at his coffee. But I almost did. And that scared me. More than I knew how to handle. She looked at him. So you disappeared, she said. Yes. Instead of telling me. Yes. Read. I know. She set her own coffee down, turned toward him on the couch, one knee up, facing him fully the way she did when something required her complete attention. Talk to me, she said. Not the managed version. The actual version. He was quiet for a moment. That center outward process. She waited. The last time I felt this way about someone, he said, I was wrong about everything. Every single thing I thought I knew about her, about what we had, about what I meant to her, all of it was wrong. He looked at his hands. And I built my entire life after that on the premise that I would never be that wrong again. That I would never let anyone close enough to be that wrong about. And then I showed up. And then you showed up. A breath. And you were you. Which meant none of my usual systems worked. I couldn't assess you from a distance, couldn't manage the situation, couldn't find the angle or the agenda because there wasn't one. You were just, he stopped. Real. Just completely real. And I wasn't prepared for that. So 3 weeks and you walked past a jewelry store. And my brain did something I haven't let it do in 15 years, he said. It went forward. It imagined, he stopped again. Jaw tight. And then it panicked. And I pulled away. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Processing. Not performing calm, actually finding it, the way she did when a situation required her to be the steadiest person in the room. Can I tell you something? She said. He looked at her. I know what it feels like to have your instincts betray you, she said. To trust your own read on something, someone, for 19 years and then find out you've been reading a different story than the one you were actually in. She held his gaze. I rebuilt myself after that. Carefully. I made myself smaller in some ways, more defended in others. I told myself I was being smart. You were protecting yourself. I was hiding, she said simply. And I was very good at it. And then you showed up and I wasn't prepared either. A pause. The difference is I didn't disappear. And I need you to understand why that matters to me. He was very still. If something scares you, she said, I need you to come toward me with it. Not away from me. Not Wednesday coffees that don't arrive and assistant phone calls and a pane of glass where your actual face used to be. Her voice was steady, but he could hear what lived underneath it. Not anger, something more important than anger. I can handle hard things. I've been handling hard things my whole adult life. What I can't handle is someone making decisions about us without including me in them. The word us landed in the room. He heard it. She watched him hear it, the slight widening, the thing that happened when she said something that reached past the glass and touched the actual person. I'm not Patrick, she said. I'm not Joanna. I'm not, her voice caught just slightly. I'm not anyone you've been afraid of before. I'm just me. And I'm sitting here and I'm scared too and I need you to stay in the room with me. He set his coffee down. He turned toward her on the couch, mirroring her, both of them facing each other fully now, the Mia blanket pushed aside, the city outside unaware of the small enormous thing happening inside this apartment. I don't know how to do this, he said. Low. Honest. Stripped of the careful Callaway architecture completely. I know how to build things. I know how to run things. I know how to survive things. A pause. I don't know how to just let something be good, without waiting for it to break. Neither do I, she said. I've been waiting for you to decide I'm not who you thought I was. You're exactly who I thought you were. And you're exactly who I thought you were, she said. Which is why I'm still sitting here. Something in his face broke open. Not dramatically, quietly, the way the most important things happened between them. A loosening. A final relinquishing of the last held-back piece. I should have called you, he said. The minute I got scared I should have called you. Yes, she said. You should have. I'm sorry. I know. She looked at him steadily. Don't do it again. I won't. Read. I won't, he said. I mean it. She believed him. Not because he said it perfectly or because it was the thing she wanted to hear. She believed him because she'd spent enough time learning his language to know when he was speaking from the center of himself rather than the managed exterior. And this, exhausted honest, sitting on her couch with a Mia blanket beside him and his coffee going cold, this was the center. She reached out. Her hand on his. The same gesture as Lola's, the same offer, not a demand, a door left open. He took it. Immediately. Like he'd been waiting for it the whole conversation. They sat like that for a long time. The city outside. The quiet inside. Two people who had both been through enough to know that this, the staying, the saying the hard thing, the choosing to come back to the room instead of away from it, was what it actually looked like. Not the butterflies, not the grand gestures. This. 2 months later. She had never been a person who walked by the lake. She'd lived in Chicago her whole life, and the lake had always been background. Beautiful, enormous, permanently there, something she drove past and occasionally glanced at and never actually stood beside for any length of time. Reed had changed that. Sunday mornings now. The lakefront path, the water doing whatever the season asked of it, gray and violent in winter, this particular shade of impossible blue in May. They walked and talked or walked and didn't talk, and both were equally comfortable, which was itself a thing she hadn't had before, the ease of shared silence that didn't require management. This Sunday he was telling her about a building he was planning on the south side, a mixed-income development, genuinely mixed, not the token version, which had required fighting his own board for 8 months. His voice when he talked about it was different from his boardroom voice. Less armored. The Gary, Indiana version. She listened. Asked real questions. Watched him talk about something that mattered to him with the specific pleasure of a woman who had access to the real person and knew what a gift that was. They stopped at a bench with a clear view of the water. Sat down. The May sun on their faces. The lake going about its ancient business. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "The ring." He looked at the water. "The one you almost bought." "Yes." "What did it look like?" A pause. A long one. Then something happened on his face, that full, unguarded smile, the one that only came when she surprised him. "Simple," he said. "Single stone. Nothing performative." Why?" She looked at the lake. Just wanted to know. He was quiet. She could feel him deciding something beside her, that same quality of internal arrival she'd learned to recognize, the Reed-Calloway process of moving from center outward. "Claire. I'm going to go back to that store." She kept looking at the lake. Her heart doing something large and loud. "Okay," she said. "Not today." "Okay. But I'm going to go back." She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. No glass, no distance, no architecture. Just Reed. 52 years old and scared and certain simultaneously, which she was learning was exactly how you were supposed to feel about the right thing. "When you do," she said, "call me first." His face. God, his face. "Deal," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The lake kept going, indifferent, enormous, beautiful, and they sat in the May sunshine with the city at their backs and the water ahead and all of it. The white sheets and the stranger's bed and the flowers and the fold-out couch and Lola's and the hard conversation on her couch and the Wednesday coffees. All of it had been the path to this bench, this shoulder, this particular quality of morning. She closed her eyes. Present, Mia had said. Yes. Finally, fully, irreversibly. Present. If you stayed all the way here, past the fear and the pulling away and the moment where it almost broke, you already know this story was never about a billionaire. It was about the courage it takes to stay in the room when everything in you is screaming to run. To say the hard thing instead of going quiet. To let someone love you even when your history tells you it won't last. Reed learned it. Claire already knew it. She just needed someone worth practicing it with. If this hits something in you, something real, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's not too late. Drop a comment with where you felt it most. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the story that should change that.